stories to be told, treasures to be found, silver and gold, dollars and pounds, never worth more than the stories of a town.
Alice Springs owes its modern white European existence to being in the middle of this giant continent.
It began as a vital link on the overland telegraph and subsequently as the major railhead in the Northern Territory, with cattle and goods being shipped through its yards to destinations right round Australia. But the 3 or 4 generations of white Europeans that have called Alice Springs home is a mere flash in the pan compared to the more than 330 generations of Aboriginal people that have called this area Arunta.
Territorians are renowned for their innovative and inventive approach to problems which arise from living in remote areas. And one of the Territory's legendary innovators was a chap called Kurt Johansson. And Bertha and her entourage was his creation, Australia's first road train. Now, Kurt was a mechanic, inventor and dogged pioneer. His association with motor vehicles began on the family property at Deepwell Station, some 80 kilometres south of Alice Springs. In the late 1930s, he took over the mail run to Bertha in the north. But it was the road train that became his signature vehicle, and Bertha was his prototype.
Kurt's inspiration came from this magnificent old beast here that was built in England in the 1930s. This is the only one surviving in the world, which used an ingenious steering system for the trailer. Kurt then modified that idea for use in his extraordinary road train. It was a simple idea. Each axle had a turntable. Each turntable had a long arm, and the arms were connected under the middle of each trailer in this big knuckle system here, making all the trailers self-steering, each wheel preceding the following wheel in exactly the same pattern. This system of having a prime mover pulling a number of trailers was to revolutionise the transport of cargo throughout the outback.
Until the early 1930s, the town's official name was Stuart. Alice Springs was the name given to the local telegraph station. This dual naming created such confusion for the administrators in Adelaide that on the 31st of August 1933, the township of Stuart was officially gazetted Alice Springs.
Here we go, that's mine.
Yep.
Thank you. The advent of the overland telegraph made a huge difference to Australia in 1872. It was an enormous step to helping to break down the sense of isolation the country felt at the time. Messages and business notes took months by sea, now took a matter of hours. Wow.
This is the best preserved part of what was once a vital link in Australia's early communication infrastructure. The site also stands as a monument to the beginning of white settlement in Central Australia. When the telegraph station became redundant in 1932, the buildings became an Aboriginal school, of which Alec Ross has mixed memories.
When I came as a boy, that wasn't a battery room then, it was a schoolroom for the children.
Right.
And they did cut the two ends and to make it into one schoolroom.
Right.
At the time, most mixed blood children were not cared for or uncared for because the fathers actually went home after having 3 or 4 children with an Aboriginal woman And rather than take them back, they left them with the mother, and the mother had problems looking after them. The thing is, of course, that when I was taken, I was sent to hospital, and of course, got to Alice Springs, I don't know how many days later, but he took me by camel, and I was sick with pneumonia. And I had to be rugged up and warm all the way down. I remember him putting a lot of clothes around me. I was there 5 months before they sent me to the telegraph station. I met, for the first time, a lady that really cared about us, you know. And I thought, you know, at the time when I left for my mother, I thought, well, I'll never meet anyone again, you know, that take care of me like my mother did. She tried to. She was 15, so she couldn't really. And when I was taken, she was just loving and caring. So she was just, to me, another mother.
Aboriginal Centralians have had very little time to adapt to the new realities. Aboriginal families were still coming out of the desert into contact with Europeans for the first time as late as the 1960s, with the last known family emerging from the Gibson Desert in 1984.
The Central Arunta people are the traditional owners of Alice Springs, and the town, being the hub for the entire region of Central Australia, has attracted Aboriginal people and their artwork from the district and well beyond.
Some of the first dreaming stories ever recorded were those of the Arunta people. According to the traditional owners, the landscape was shaped by caterpillars, wild dogs, travelling boys, two sisters, Euros, and many other ancestral figures. Many talented people have left lasting imprints on the town of Alice Springs, the most notable being Albert Namatjira. He used a European style of art, a style that non-Aboriginal people could immediately appreciate.
Another, not so widely known individual had a huge cultural impact. A local school teacher by the name of Jeff Barton in 1971 inspired the local community to paint traditional designs on the wall of a school not far from Alice. This simple act created an explosion in using traditional designs on non-traditional media throughout Central Australia.
This artwork now finds itself hanging in galleries all around the world. Alice Springs seems to specialise in solving the problems of isolation. Perhaps the best example is the School of the Air. It's operated from Alice Springs for over 50 years. In 1944, a lady by the name of Miss Adelaide Mithke recognised that children living in the outback were very shy. She felt that the radio could be used to provide a social aspect to the school life of bush children. The idea caught the imagination of the South Australian Education Department. This new method of schooling officially began broadcasting on the 8th of June 1951 and is still used today by 140 children living on isolated properties all through Central Australia.
The School of the Air has pretty much kept pace with the technology available. This is the old radio room from the 1970s, still operational, but not used very often these days. The room itself, though, it speaks volumes. It's like an honour board of famous people who have got on air with the kids.
And this was another means of overcoming outback isolation. An estimated 10,000 camels were imported into Australia between 1860 and 1907 and were used by people pioneering and exploring the dry interior. The establishment of the overland telegraph was made possible by these beasts, and they were also used extensively to supply goods to Alice Springs, cattle and sheep stations, missions and Aboriginal communities throughout Central Australia.
My grandfather came to Australia from a place called Kandahar in Afghanistan in the late 1800s. He came by ship, of course. They brought the animals with them. Previous to that, they brought out camels in the 1840s. but it was not reliable because they didn't have the experienced camel handlers to control the animals. Camel train could exist up to 70 camels. As you can imagine, it needed a few handlers to handle the camels. In the 1920s, the camel industry slowly died down due to mechanical transportation. They're starting to realise now and really appreciate the role that the Afghan camels did actually play, and along with a lot of Aboriginal cameleers as well.
From Altunga to Mary.
One of the major hurdles for Alice the town was the protracted construction of the rail line north from Adelaide. The railway really took its time getting to Alice. At first, the line from Adelaide terminated at Oodnadatta, some 600 kilometres south, which meant that lots of camels were still gainfully employed getting supplies through to Alice.
Alice Springs isolation ended when the line was extended in 1929. By then, cars and aeroplanes were occasional visitors to the area as well. The old Gan, which was pulled at times by this locomotive in its heyday, was named after the old cameleers who for decades before had made up for the shortfall in the line's progress. The old narrow gauge line was replaced in 1980, but just south of Alice Springs is a short section of preserved track which brings to life the memories of this frontier railway. The journey to Alice has often been an adventurous one. The original timetable for the Gan had the train taking 3 days from Adelaide to Alice Springs, but 3 weeks was not uncommon, with floods, extremes in heat and derailments frequent. But now, with the completion of the 100-year dream, opening the new line through to Darwin in 2004 has made the journey much more reliable, and Alice Springs has become a through station instead of a terminus. Everybody seems to be coming or going from Alice Springs. Some stay longer than others, some move quicker than others. But it will always remain a giant crossroads in the middle of Australia and a very welcome waterhole, which makes it a great Australian icon town. All right, let's go.